Hey guys, Riley here from the Awesome Players Off-Road Motorcycle Club, and it's the first ride of the year with the boys. Spring was late in coming, so we are, almost 2/3 of the way through April. We're finally going to get out there, but I think most of the trails will still be snowed in. So I'm meeting Super Dave here. We're going to head to Hawkesbury, where we're going to meet up with Jason and Marc on his new Honda Africa Twin. So should be fun. Here you can see my poor Husky 701 all loaded up. So I've got the hippo hands on, and those keep the winds off your hands because we're right around the freezing point right now, although it's supposed to be 13 degrees later. Got my little miniature tank bag. And on the front, from this company, Dirt Bike Gear, I've got this pouch here that goes above the headlight, which I really like. And then I was wearing a fanny pack with all my tools, but I really didn't like doing that, so I got a set of Wolfman very small saddlebags, and the straps just fit right under the seat. Doesn't come anywhere near the muffler, and that's now carrying all my tools and everything. On the dash, got the old Montana still, my Spot, and on this side, this is kind of a temporary installation. I've got this new tire pressure monitoring system, which, where is it? Has these little senders. So we're gonna see how that works. And you can set an alarm and all kinds of good stuff to let you know when one of your tires is getting low. So that's the setup for now. Look what the cat dragged in. With his fancy new helmet. Transformers. Dorks in disguise.
Morning.
Morning. How are you,
No,
sir?
I haven't had coffee yet.
Good. Me neither.
Which is doing me in. Perfect. Right, ready to go. Let's hit the road, Bill.
Hey guys, Riley here from the Awesome Players Off-Road Motorcycle Club, and as you heard in the little introduction, this would be the first ride of 2018. So here I am zooming along on my Husky 701, and somewhere up ahead we've got Super Dave on his F800GS. We got Marc on his new from last season Honda Africa Twin, and we've got Jason on his KTM 500. We did not meet at Tim Hortons. We actually met at A&W, which has a somewhat mediocre breakfast. Given the very late spring we experienced this year, there wasn't much chance that any of the trails in the woods would be free of snow. And as you can see here, this is about 45 minutes to an hour outside of Montreal, slightly higher elevation, and already there's plenty of snow on the side of the road. When we got to the spot where the snowplows turn around, we could see that there was going to be some snow on this ride. Riding on the snow, it really depends on the consistency of the snow. Sometimes you can actually have pretty good traction if it's kind of a crunchy snow, or if it's not too deep, you can kind of chew down to solid surface, or if it's really hard, you can just kind of ride on the top. What we were seeing here was that the top was kind of a corn snow, but underneath, in a lot of places, it was basically ice. And I think some other trail users who'd spun their way along here had kind of created that ice. And you could tell the big bikes were going to have a little more trouble, partially because they're not running quite as aggressive a tire, but also the simple fact that those big bikes have got a lot of gravity in them. I'm following Marc here And I can see he's dancing around pretty good on the Africa Twin. We also figured out at some point that there was a bit of an advantage to going first. There was kind of this very thin little crust. And if you were the first guy, that little crust gave you just a little extra bite. And if you followed someone else in one of these ruts who had spun all the way up, then the crust was all gone and you had this nice polished surface, which was going to make it a lot more challenging to get up these hills. One of the surprises this morning when we all met up was that our friend Jason on his KTM 500 had spent the winter ironing out some of the bugs with this bike because he had bought it used, but he had also sent away and designed a custom sticker kit for his 500. And I think I'm going to look over my right shoulder here at some point, and you'll get a quick glimpse of his newly kitted out 500.
Dave is stuck. You need help, Dave?
I'm on the intercom with Dave.
Okay, we'll wait here. If you need help, let us know.
And Dave and I have had Senna headsets for quite a while, but over the winter we ponied up and we bought the new Senna 30 headset. Here you can see some steam coming out of Jason's bike.
This bike's got a bad case of the steamies.
He had actually overfilled the coolant overflow tank, so the bike, when it heated up, just burped out a bit of coolant, so it didn't turn out to be anything serious.
All right, we're going to come back. Hold on. Am I rolling?
I went back to give Super Dave a hand, and as you can see, this is actually, once again, a steep hill. He's sliding backwards just by putting the brakes on. But with a little push, Dave was on his way. And you'll notice there's going to be a lot of pushing on this video. There won't be a lot of pulling because, oddly enough, we don't have a douche rope.
Right in the middle.
We're up the creek without a douche rope, as it were. On this next section, we were making pretty good time, and I could hear through the intercom that there was some sort of little ravine crossing the road up ahead. And then way in the distance, it's hard to see, you'll see just in front of Marc, who's in front of me.
There's a crevasse, Dave.
You'll see Dave.
Some jam. Woo!
Dave goes down.
Dave, wait for us.
It's one thing to pick up your big bike all by yourself. It's another thing on a day like today where you know from the get-go you're probably going to be picking it up more than once. Therefore, you might as well wait for some help and save your strength because the guys on the smaller bikes are going to be expending a lot less energy riding. They might as well make up for it by expending a lot more energy lifting. I decided to be really cautious crossing this little groove and thumped my front tire down into it, and of course the rear tire's on ice, and that was that.
Sorry.
Dave came to the rescue, and I'm standing beside the bike here to get the weight off of it, and then it wasn't too much of an ordeal to get the 701 out of the little ravine. But even now that I'm on level ground here, just trying to get going on that snow. As you can see, a winter of doing yoga has vastly improved my flexibility, so I'm easily able to swing my leg over the high seat of the Husky.
Ah, Dave, just keep those elbows up. Come on, you don't need a steering damper.
We started making good progress once again, and at this point, I was tailing Charlie, since I figured at some point I'd be having to help guys lift bikes, and in this case, it was Marc who dumped the Africa Twin on its side. It's kind of funny on this kind of riding, which I've done a few times. Every time you see a little patch of dirt, your morale just goes up. It's just so nice to have a little spot where you know the bike's just not suddenly going to shoot out underneath you. Although here it was surprisingly deep in that one spot. But all good things must come to an end, and within a few meters we were back up on the ice. A little farther along, we came to a decent hill. I could see both Super Dave and Marc hadn't made it. I decided to not lose any momentum, and I'd come back to help them from the top of the hill. But just slowing down that little amount it took me to avoid them, and all of a sudden, I started spinning. I was just inching my way up here, and then at one point I could feel the bike going backwards, and now it was time for me to get off and push. Jason was the lead element here, so he had actually made it up the hill on the 500.
I think I'm okay now.
He gave me a little tug.
Hold on.
And I moved off to the side here onto this little crustier section and was able to get going. And then it was time to stop and walk back and help the big boys.
Cross-country skiing is an abomination.
I was being pretty judicious with my recording here because I'd only brought one battery for the GoPro. But once again on the next hill, first the 800, then the Africa Twin, both kind of ran out of steam. I was able to make it. We did notice at one point that the Africa Twin was having a little more success getting up these hills, even though it didn't have a more aggressive tire. I think part of it is that the 800 just loves to spin. I mean, I had an 800 for many years, and it always seemed in slippery conditions. As soon as that 800 broke traction, it would just spin, and bikes like the HB2 and others would lose traction and not spin, even if they had a crappier tire on.
Gotta air down that tire more.
There's no button.
24.
We were having so much fun pushing and pulling the big bikes up the hills that we decided we might as well take a minute or two and really air down the tires, especially the rear tires. These guys were running street pressures in the 30s, and we wanted to get down into the teens.
We'll pump it.
Dave seemed unconvinced, but I was the man with the gauge, and I was going to get it down to 15 psi no matter what.
What's that? 16.
That is low. What about the front?
Oh, 24. That's going to feel like a brand new
No.
machine.
Go lower.
Yeah, I don't have to pump it up on the
We
way
got
in.
pump. Live life. For the guys who were pushing you up the hills would like lower pressure.
22?
15. And that's a soft sidewall tire, so that'll be nice.
After a little debate, the motorcycle pushers seemed to have won out over the big bike motorcycle riders, and we did get all the pressures down into the teens. And then we set off again to see how far we could get. Of course, in any situation like this, you're always kind of calculating in the back of your mind, like, how far are we going to go before we turn around? because it's not going to be a picnic getting out of here. And the only thing that's happening as this ride progresses is we're getting more and more fatigued. So if we just ride into this trail until we're all totally exhausted to find out there's no way out, then it's really going to be an ordeal to backtrack.
Let you guys go first.
A little farther along, and once more the Africa Twin was taking a little snow nap.
Oh, he tried to change lanes there.
I think, as you just heard me, I think Marc had tried to go from one rut to the other, and crossing that little hump, the bike just shot out from under him. When we got to the first long downhill section, we all spaced out. I don't think anybody was interested in skidding down this hill and tangling up with anybody else. So I let the boys get quite a ways ahead. And you can see here the snow's a little bit deeper than it was at the beginning of this trail, but it wasn't icy. So this downhill was actually not too bad.
You want to get naked.
On the next uphill, Dave was once again polishing the road with his rear tire. And I tried to change lanes, and then I got all wiggly here, and once the front wheel fell off the road, I was done for. Marc had actually made it up this hill on the Africa Twin, as had Jason on the 500. You'll notice that Marc is wearing that Scorpion 950 helmet, which is a flip, and Dave is also wearing that Scorpion 950, and I haven't seen it yet, but I believe Chris has bought one of these Scorpion 950s. So everybody seems pretty happy with these Scorpion flip helmets, and it is nice in a situation like this where you got to get off your bike, hump down the hill, and start huffing and puffing. It really makes a difference when you can flip that chin bar up and you're not just rebreathing your own halitosis.
It's pretty good up here. I think going first is better. You get the crust, and once the crust is gone, so maybe we'll let Dave go first. No, he found a new place to go. Oh, it's really... Hold on. Oh.
I hadn't seen Marc for a while, so I turned around to come back, but our man Jason was already on the scene.
The technique of standing on the rim.
I saw that from that guy in Vancouver, Moto Trek.
Oh yeah.
And that's one of the perks of having an intercom system, is that all your friends get to share in all of your belches. I could see here Marc was starting to show a little wear and tear. He was working pretty hard, and he'd lifted this bike quite a few times, and as I mentioned before, I was being a little cheap on the battery on the GoPro, so there was a few things that had happened that I don't have any footage of. Those Africa Twins sound really nice with the factory exhaust.
Somebody was in here with a pickup truck, man.
Then we had a pretty good run where we just kept moving. We started covering a bit more ground. Stuff seemed a little softer, and then
Marc is not gentle down.
Marc just kind of stepped off the bike there. I think that was one of those deals where you just don't want to get stuck under the bike, so the best thing to do is just get away from it.
Take a moment, enjoy the day. What's the best way to grab? Should we do the guy from the Fundies technique? Ready? Yeah, he's a big believer on handlebar.
Yep. Got it.
Hop on. I got her.
Once again, a little farther down the road, I was following Marc and Super
Marc is
Dave,
downing.
and
I got him.
Marc just kind of lost momentum and down he went. Here he was actually pinned under the bike pretty good. And even though the Africa Twin is billed as a more off-road oriented adventure bike, it's still up there in the weight class. I think it weighs at least as much as an F800GS, if not more. And when you're kind of smushed into the ground with it, that's a lot of weight. This is one of those situations where I'm pretty sure Marc was happy to not be riding alone. It was also nice to have the intercom in this situation because Dave, who was up ahead, could still talk to me. And I was telling him not to bother coming back and help, that we'd have Marc up and running in a few minutes and he could just sit tight. At this point, a bunch of ATVs came by, and I think they showed quite convincingly that four-wheel drive tops one-wheel drive by a wide margin because they were not having any difficulty making it down this trail.
Hey, Dave. ATV's coming. ATV's coming.
At this point, we were coming up to the little sand pit, and this would be, I think, our turnaround spot. If we were going to decide to turn around and go back, this would be it.
Coming up to the water crossing. Any advice? All right. I like it, Dave. I like the way your mind works.
The actual sand pit itself had melted quite a bit, so Jason ripped around a bit up on the hill, as did the guys on the ATVs. And while we were here, we had a chance to talk to them, so we asked them if they'd been farther than this point, and they said no, they hadn't, that the last time they'd come up this way a few days ago, they got this far, and then one of the ATVs threw a belt. So they turned around and went back. So they weren't actually a source of any information on whether or not we should proceed.
What's up, Super Dave?
Okay, so we've done the Scotch Road. It's the hardest one we've ever done.
What do you mean we've done it? We're not halfway.
Well, it's the most of effort we have ever put into the Scotch Road so far. We're halfway, well, nearly halfway down the Scotch Road.
And where's
It's nothing
the
but
douche
snow
rope?
and ice. And the douche rope is suitably named because normally if you're on one end of it, you're the douchebag. And this time it's in Chris's pocket.
And where's the original douche rope?
In Chris's pocket.
He's got two of my douche ropes.
So Chris isn't here,
Yes.
so it's true to say that if you're on one end of the douche rope, you're a douchebag, and if you're on the other end, i.e. attached to Chris, you're still a douchebag.
The ATV guys seemed honestly impressed that we'd made it this far. So we took that as a compliment, and off we went. Of course, if you've watched any of our videos, you know that if we have no information to the contrary, then we always assume that the best way is forward and that there is a way out. So we carried on. We could see tire tracks, so we did take some solace in the fact that someone had been down this road. We didn't know if they'd managed to make it out the other end, but it seemed pretty likely because, you know, with the knowledge we have of this road, there was nothing between the sand pit and the exit that was going to be any rougher than what we'd already been through. And then the battery
There, Bill.
in the GoPro died, so the only camera I had left was my little Sony Handycam, which I could only use when we were stopped. So I whipped out the Handycam once I caught up to Marc, and here you can see on relatively level ground him trying to get that Africa Twin going. He's being pretty judicious with that clutch and throttle, and he still kind of slid off. There's a little bit of a camber to that snow off to the left. And then he got back up on the pegs and off he went. Then it was Jason's turn, and you can see that thing looks like a bicycle.
There goes Jason on the 500. A little easier than on the Africa Twin.
We were making pretty good progress. So a little farther down the trail we stopped to have a little rest.
Let's go, boys! Woo!
And we had pretty much figured we were going to make it at this point, and we were getting close to the exit when we saw the sign of all signs. A guy coming the other way on a cruiser with 4 inches of ground clearance and street tires. And when you see that, you know you made it. So we'd made it. So we headed to the local watering hole, where I think we were the only non-Harley Davidson enthusiasts there, and we enjoyed a local brew. I hope you enjoyed the video. Hit the like button, hit subscribe, visit us at awesomeplayers.com to buy a sticker, or head over to our Facebook page. And with that, I'd like to thank you once again for joining us on another small adventure of the Awesome Players Off-Road Motorcycle Club. Thanks for watching.